Thank you so much for being here today. So, over the next sort of 20, 25 minutes, I'd really love to break down how we define ACT, right? Like, so some people mention philanthropy, platform, taking a bet on the future. We've always called ourselves a venture philanthropy platform, right? So, Sandeep, if I were to come to you first and really get into the venture philanthropy part of our identity, what do we mean when we say venture philanthropy, and why did we choose this as our mode of grant giving? And as a follow up, based on your work in Act for Health over the last 3 years, what are some of the challenges and opportunities that you've really identified with this approach?
I think the key is the combination of the two words, venture and philanthropy. When ACT started, it was started by, I would call the venture community. And the venture community included both the investors and the startup founders. And the whole thesis was, can we bring the approach that a venture ecosystem works on, which is speed, which is scale, which is sustainability, and obviously all driven by passion. And can we bring that into the philanthropy world? That was the thesis, and Mohit was, I would say, along with some of our fellow VCs, was sort of critical in driving that. And that was the big difference that we brought when we did the COVID relief work. So during COVID relief, we said, okay, we don't have time. So that's where the speed element became a big thing. If you look at how VCs work, VCs take decisions on large companies that eventually will become large companies very early on in the journey of the company. So there is a sort of pattern matching, a pattern recognition that you do to say, can this become a large business? Does this team have it in them to sort of go through the ups and downs of building a business? And when it becomes a large business, what is the impact that it will have? In the VC space, it's mostly about returns, but it's not just returns, right? You can't build a large business, let's say a Zomato. You can't build Zomato if you're not having some impact somewhere. So it's the same model that applies over here, except the only difference is impact is measured more in the social context rather than the commercial context. But other than that, venture philanthropy behaves exactly like venture capital does. We look at scale, we look at sustainability, and we look at the passion the entrepreneur brings into the business.
And any challenges or specific USP that you would say this approach has compared to other approaches that philanthropy has?
So, what we end up doing is working with a lot of private organizations who are making that transition to working in the public sector or in the charitable space and so on. There is a little bit of a mind shift that has to happen. That mind shift sometimes includes investors in those companies and how they will work with us. Example of that is Visa, right? Ramakant is here in the audience. There, Visa built a chatbot for mild anxiety and depression cases, and was very successful with working with the NHS in the UK. They have clients in the US, and we said, why don't we have a solution in Hindi? And it was like, well, is there a market? Is there something that we want to put our efforts behind? It's going to take 9 months to build out a bot. So we effectively catalyzed that by saying, okay, we'll partner with you. We spoke to apart from Ramakant and Joe, we spoke to their investors and said, if we come and partner with you, would you want to do a Hindi solution? Which they agreed to. And I think you can talk about it later, but basically they are seeing the need in the market, they're seeing adoption. And so our original thesis is playing out.
Thanks, Sandeep. Yeah, Ramakant will be joining us shortly to share a little bit more about the Visa chatbot. But I think one of the points that you started with, right? And Mohit, I'd like to come to you because like Sandeep mentioned, ACT was really born from the venture community. So when we talk about venture capital and venture philanthropy, what are some of the lessons that social entrepreneurs can really leverage from India's booming startup ecosystem about how do you really take tech and innovation and use that to create impact at scale? But also equally importantly, what are some of the things that they should be mindful or careful about?
Sure. But let me first start by extending my own very warm welcome. It's just incredible to see everyone gathered here today. Old friends that we've built ACT along with that I've never met and had a chance to give a hug to today, and founders and fellow investors. Thank you. And when Akanksha stands up and say, welcome to ACT Summit 2023, well, it's our first. So, so it's not like we've been doing this every year. So thank you for being here. Okay. Look, I've been part of the startup ecosystem in India for the last 17 years, so almost 2 decades. And certainly for me, one massive highlight has been when we all came together. And I mean, founders and investors and all other industry participants to help create ACT. And for me, I'm just humbled and so, just fortunate, I guess, to be one of the co-founders of what we're all trying to create here together. Answering your question, the one thing I've understood well over the last almost 2 decades is, and I've witnessed this personally, it takes the hunger, the persistence, the resilience, the creativity of someone called a founder to really impact any change. To be able to go after a really, really hard to solve problem and be willing to give over a decade of your life to go solve that, knowing fully well even then you may not reach, is not for the faint-hearted. And for me, the opportunity and why we're all in this room and what we all saw when we started this is to try and channel some of that entrepreneurial fire, passion, energy towards some of India's largest societal problems, whether it's in education, health, gender equality, or climate change. And answering your question around, in my day job, in our day jobs, when we're doing venture investing, it's actually incredibly similar to when we're giving grants out for ACT. At the heart of it, we're looking for founders and management teams that have massive, massive missionary zeal. Someone who's willing to have that sense of purpose and that North Star to drive them for the 100% going to be their downfalls that are going to happen in that journey. And so we're looking for people who are incredibly purpose-driven, whether you're giving a grant or you're giving a for-profit equity investment. The other similarity I would tell you is, and this may be contentious with some here, but we've learned the best way to build a scaled-up business and to do it quickly needs technology as a bedrock. And so whether you are a for-profit company or you are a non-profit or a for-profit in the trying to solve India's social problems, you need to be able to embrace technology. And Latika's here from Microsoft and others talking about AI, and we've obviously been living with data scientists. Well, that's a common challenge for for-profit as well as non-profit companies to be able to attract and retain world-class tech talent. Because without that, it's really, really hard to sort of change some of the inherent problems in our world. The one difference I see in our commercial world versus that in the nonprofit is that in our commercial world, it's well understood that seed funds become a funnel for the venture funds, and the venture funds become a funnel for the growth funds. But the little that I've understood about the social sector, we have a lot of well-meaning people who give grants or equity capital at the early stage, but there seems to be a gap for the growth capital to really scale up some of the initiatives, programs, and companies that have demonstrated that product market fit. And so if there was one ask that I would ask for everyone here is to really shake that network to try and attract that growth capital to really double down onto some of those early winners so that they can actually get to their true potential. But I'd like to, with your permission, just bring us back to as to why we created ACT and sort of what keeps us going. And I'm just going to read out the charter that was put together when we first started this, and for me, it still holds a lot of meaning. So give me a minute. This is the ACT charter. It says, we believe anything is possible when people come together for a larger purpose. We believe an entrepreneurial mindset has the power to solve societal problems at scale. We believe founders who build successful businesses can also build the foundations for a better world. Leaders who create great shareholder value also have the empathy to create greater shared value. We believe in collective action. We believe in the power of technology and innovation to drive sustainable social change. We believe in supporting ideas that are capital efficient, scale ready, and can create immediate impact. So whether you're a venture capitalist or a philanthropist, an entrepreneur or an individual with a novel idea, or a domain expert or a social change activist, we believe you can be a vital part of the movement. We believe everyone can be a co-founder of social change.
Thank you, Mohit. And I think that's a nice segue into sort of the platform part of our identity, right? When we say everyone can be a co-founder of social change. Mekin, I'd like to come to you because I know this is something you've really pushed the group's thinking on from the very beginning on how do we really collaborate and continue to bring likely and unlikely partners together. So how do individuals from the startup and the tech and the VC sectors come together with NGOs and governments and foundations to really deepen and accelerate our impact beyond just the funds that we could give them, right? So could you give us maybe one or two examples of how ACT has really catalyzed collectives, both during our COVID work or currently in ACT for Education? And why, according to you, is this so critical?
We come together like this. That's how we come together. I'm overjoyed to see all of you, right? Like I'm meeting so many of you from Zoom because that's where we met, that's where we worked, and we worked for a long time together and did a lot together. And now to see all of you in person, yeah, my heart is just jumping. So excuse me. Yeah, I think again, Sandeep touched upon it. The work that happened during COVID relief, I don't think is understandable by organizational theory or, hey, what kind of volunteering organizations can you set up? It's just people getting together because there is a need, there is a cause, and just doing their bit, right? Regardless of position, experience, expertise, people just coming in, stepping in, and doing a whole bunch of things, right? So from solving for, yeah, I think the visual coming to my head is that of a airplane carrying medicine supplies from Delhi to Goa, all of it happening overnight in the space of about 4 hours, because like the previous 3 days, we had lost lives in Goa because we just did not have basic capacity, and that capacity was sitting here in Delhi. And for that, for an Air Force plane to come in, for government approvals to happen, for custom clearances, for goods to move, and all of it happening seamlessly in a very, very short period of time, right? It's impossible to be done by any one person in the world, right? Any one person in the world. Right? But it's made possible in a short period of time because this community got together, because people said that, hey, this was important. If Mohit is calling me, I can trust him, and hey, he has verified his bit of the information, and that trust transferred so rapidly through the entire ecosystem, right? That got us to do amazing amount of things during that space. I think another example that's coming to my mind is, so I used to be a techie, I'm still a techie at heart, and I believe that techies are good at heart. I seriously do. Right? And so I was like, hey, there are so many good-hearted technologists who want to contribute to the development sector, but there aren't opportunities, right? They don't know how. And to put that theory to test, I put out a simple tweet saying, hey, who are the people who would want to contribute, right? And in less than 24 hours, there were 88 names on an Excel sheet saying, hey, I want to contribute, right? I don't know how, as in show me the path, but anywhere between 2 hours in a week to 2 hours a day is something I would love to contribute. And these were all senior, like I had said that, hey, at least 5+ years or you've built stuff at certain scale, please volunteer. And from that simple tweet to now having run 2 cohorts of tech advisors where nonprofits and these tech advisors partner together and spend considerable amount of time, leading to a lot more meaningful relationships like board positions or people starting to work more deeply, etc. To me is another example of very, very unlikely partnerships starting to happen, just because I think I now stand at a place where the techies also think I'm theirs and the non-profit wallas also think I'm theirs. So I get a little bit of trust from both sides. But more than that, it is the community and the intent, right? That people understanding that, hey, what we're trying to do, the intention behind it and the simplicity and the purity of that intention, that being trusted is probably what gets communities together.
Thanks, Mekin. In fact, I think some of our tech advisors are here today in the room, so it'll be lovely to meet with them later. But Suman, I think just taking forward what Mekin said on techies are good at heart, right? And the fact that when we talk about our community, the biggest stakeholder and I think one of the biggest founders have been startup founders, right? Um, and I think that's something that ACT as all of us are uniquely confirmed in our belief that startup founders do have an important role to play in India's philanthropic journey. So based on your experience, Suman, like why is this a segment that we care so much about? And how, if at all, are they thinking about social impact?
Sure. First of all, like all of you, I'm just thrilled to be back in person meetings. And like Mekin, so many of you are familiar over Zoom. So pardon me if I'm trying to figure out, which Zoom call we were in, but it's just wonderful to be here in person. I think the big thing I would say, from our journey, I come from Freshworks, is we all want to do good, right? Besides creating, good companies, we all want to do good. That's the essential thing that I see in the VC community, in the startup founder community as well. And the biggest thing, and I want to touch upon what Mekin said, is on the power of the collective. In our experience, we've been doing a bunch of stuff as an individual company, right? We wanted to create a good organization, a great organization, and we held some fundamental beliefs that, talent is everywhere, opportunities are not. So the way we hired people was not just from the elite institutions, but we really went and hired people from, the second rung, third tier institutes, people who actually didn't even have a college degree, right? Techies in our company actually are not qualified techies, right? They're just techies at heart, and they are good at heart too. And we found that you can create a lot of change. You have the power to create change as a startup because you have the ability to break so much of what we call as conventional wisdom and think innovatively. Just think if we can harness that as a collective, and the ability to create change is just exponential, right? And I think that's the platform that ACT is able to create, where we are able to bring in, the collective passion that the community has in driving change. That's one. Two, what I really like is if you think about some of the problems that we are trying to tackle, whether it is climate or gender, there are lots of deep-rooted beliefs that exist and we are trying to change. And if you do it the traditional way, what everybody says is it's going to take 3 generations for us to make change, right? It won't happen in our lifetime. I think we shouldn't settle for that. And that's why I find that the venture philanthropy way or the startup way of doing things really breaks that mold, where you bring in innovation, you test, you challenge conventional wisdom, you put in money where you think the ideas are, and you can create change. And I really hope that this can become a catalyst for us to do things differently. And I think all of us are in positions of influence in a community, and we can really drive a very, very different kind of change, not just in our ecosystem, but around the country. That's what excites me, is really breaking the mold of how we create change and how we can really push the boundary of what we today think is undoable.
Thank you, Suman. And this is a theme that we'll sort of revisit again later in the evening as well, when we do have some startup founders and other philanthropists who've begun this journey and who've been on this journey to hear what they've been through. But before I come to you all for just closing thoughts, Akanksha, would you just like to summarize ACT and what we are today?
I'll take cues from what all 5 of you have shared, actually. But, why do we exist? I think a quick summary of that is we exist because we really care about social change. And we have a belief that we feel social change can be scaled, can happen faster if we start combining it and we start thinking tech, innovation, data. And the good thing about today is I feel quite confident that that shared vision is not just ours, it's really everyone who is sitting in the room today. So that's our why. The what, which I think Sowjanya has kind of brought to life very very well is we call ourselves a venture philanthropy platform. So in our how, those three words are embedded quite deeply. Venture philanthropy means that ultimately we are a grant-giving organization, and let's not kid ourselves. Our social entrepreneurs have spoken, and capital is really important. So first and foremost, we do exist to do that. We want to provide capital where there are needs. We are a grant-giving organization. But in addition to that, equally important for us is the platform, the collective action bit of our identity. I think, Mekin, you put it really well. Some of it can be described in these programmatic initiatives that we're doing, like Tech Advisors, Green Startup Pledge, Wiser, which is poised to be one of the largest report on women participation in the startup sector in India soon, and various others. But a lot of what we do is really building trust. It's in the conversations that we've been having with each of you at events, on Zoom, in person, in coffee shops. But just want to reiterate that that is a really, really important part of who we are. So venture philanthropy, but platform as the second part of our identity.
Thanks, Akanksha. Now, before I let all of you go and meet all of the incredible people in this room, just one last thought, right? Like, as we think about the next 3 to 5 years and we think about social entrepreneurship, we think about this vision and mission that ACT's really building, what's one thing that all of you are excited about, and hence one message you'd like to leave for ACT or for the entrepreneurs in this room? Maybe I can tag you, Suman, to go first.
I think what we would really like is for this collective to come together and participate in creating this change, whether it is in grant giving, whether it is in just actively supporting some of these changes. I think therein lies the power of us as a community, is what I would say.
It's not that we are saying startup founders will go and drive change. There are NGOs today who are doing amazing work. It's the shift of the thought process in terms of scalability and sustainability. And let me talk a little bit about the sustainability part. When we as VCs invest, we are investing early in a company, but our goal is that at some point, that company will start generating its own revenues, will have customers that will pay for its ongoing growth, right? So that's how the model works. I had a very interesting discussion with a very senior person yesterday who's working for Social Venture Partners, and their focus is more on NGOs. So we said, well, how are you different in what you're doing versus what SVP is doing? And I said, when we look at our social entrepreneurs, we're looking at people who are thinking about sustainability in the long run. And the whole idea is that we will provide catalytic capital to prove that you can actually get either the individual that you are serving to pay, or the government to pay, or someone to pay that can make you sort of self-sustaining. And that, whether you are an NGO or whether you are a startup founder, it's just a mindset shift in terms of how you think about building an organization that can scale without ongoing grants. So you don't have to think about grants at some point. That's our goal is we'll give you a grant, so you don't have to think about grants.
Failure. I think in the VC world, there's only a few companies out of the whole portfolio that go on to become giant and return the fund many times over. Many just don't make it. In our world here, there's a little bit of a mindset of how do we make each program effective. I think if we can adopt a little bit of the risk-taking ability to take those moonshots, knowing fully well if they fail, it doesn't mean that we fail, but we've learned a lot. We were recently in Japan, and you guys may have heard of the kintsugi, which is what the Japanese do when something's broken. I'm just taking that analogy to failure. They fill it up with gold, and that makes it stronger and makes it more beautiful. So embracing failure feels like a really important message for everyone to take.
Yeah, I think I'll draw on the impatience of the venture entrepreneur or the young Indian, right? I feel is important, right? That hey, yes, social change is hard, and for a lot of the tech startup scale up stories, social change is probably much harder and takes a lot more time. But at the same time, I don't think we can just relax and wait for it to happen over centuries, right? For it to happen at a glacial pace. I think the impatience has a need at time and space. So that impatience, combined with us working together to raise our collective consciousness, right? And now that's a heavy phrase, can mean many things to many people. I'll let you derive your meaning from it. But at a minimum, things that we see working, things that we see are happening and are making a difference, them growing and them growing faster, right? It's unfair if we know of answers and we know of solutions that can enable young girls to achieve their potential a lot better, and that's happening only in a small place and it's not getting scaled because there isn't growth capital or because there aren't entrepreneurs who can take that and take that further. I feel that's on us as a society. So if we can take and raise that collective consciousness and agree to work together in being impatient about the change, that's the message I'd want to leave with.
Thank you so much, Sandeep, Suman, Mohit, Mekin. We'd just love to be spending more time with you for the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you.